Good evening and welcome to the Monday, February 12 Muscatine School District Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine decorum, please? I'm sorry.
Yes. Director Connard?
Here.
Cooney? Here. DeBeat?
Here.
LaRue? Here. Phillips? Here. Schneider? Sure.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Can we stand up for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It's always good to have big crowd here at our meeting. So thank you and welcome to our board meeting for this month. With that, we move forward to our first item on our agenda, which is the public hearing for the proposed plans, specifications, proposed form of contract, and the estimated cost of the Muscatine CSD Central MS Improvements Project 01-22-0291. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Director Connard?
Aye.
Cooney? Aye. DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue? Aye. Phillips?
Aye.
Snyder? Sure.
Aye.
Okay.
All ayes.
Thank you. Anybody have any question or any discussion? Did we receive any oral or written
We did not.
questions? We did not. Okay. Any question about that? Okay, if there's no question and nor we received any written comments or oral comments, can we have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have roll call, please?
Directors Connard?
Aye.
Cooney? Aye. DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Schneider? And Sure.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. Moving forward to our next item, also public hearing for the MCSD 2024-25 school calendar. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Connard?
Aye.
Cooney? Aye. DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Schneider? Sure.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding the calendar? Or did we receive any written
did not.
communication?
No.
And it is calendar C, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so seeing that we don't have any discussion or questions, nor written comments, can we have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Connard?
Aye.
Cooney? Aye. DeBeat?
Aye.
LaRue?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Schneider? Sure.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. So moving forward, we move into the student board representative updates.
Hello, and thank you. Over the weekend, Model UN went to Chicago. The Model UN is a group where they model the diplomacy that happens at the Model United Nations. I mean, the United Nations, sorry. The MHS students, they represented the delegations of Liberia and the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda. They covered a variety of topics, from marine rights to weapons of mass destruction. During these committees, they would give speeches and write solution papers with other delegations of other countries. They would try to pass these resolutions at the end of the committees, and they also went to the Simmons Center of Global Affairs. This trip was provided by the Stanley Center. We are very thankful. The Simmons Global Affairs is a group that facilitates international nonprofits. The student council is hosting the school's winter thaw dance that will be happening on the 17th. Ticket sales will begin tomorrow at school during lunchtime and before school. Senior Survivor is being hosted by student council this year. It is a game that only seniors are allowed to play. They raise money for charity, and they have to stay a full week the whole time at school. The Senior Survivor participants have already raised over $500 for local charities. During the week of Senior Survivor, participants complete challenges prepared by student council kids and are reported points based on how well they do. The Key Club is creating the talent show this year. The talent show will be on March 8th, and auditions begin on February 21st. And finally, conferences will happen this week. They have started tonight, and in person will be between 4 and 6:30, and then virtual will be between 6:30 and 7. And Thursday is different because it's an early out schedule. It'll be only in person between 1:45 and 3:45. And Trey?
All right, since Kira covered most of the activities, I'm just going to go over some athletics with you. So this past weekend was state swim. We had multiple swimmers competing. Dakota Dalkey was swimming the 200 IM and the 200 free. And then we also had a relay team in the 2 IM made up of Maddox Warren, Joe McCleary, Kyle Ricketts, and also Dakota Dalkey. And also this past weekend, wrestling regionals occurred, which we had 2 wrestlers make it to state, Evan Frankie and Andy Frankie. Evan's ranked 3rd in the state right now, so he'll have a bye the first week, the first night, so that will start this week too. Actually tonight, girls bowling is having their regional meet. That's going on at the Rose Bowl tonight. Oh, 2 made it to state, that's great. And then the boys bowling team will have their regional meets in a couple days. Boys and girls basketball will compete in their sub-state games coming up. The boys game hasn't been released yet, but the girls will face Cedar Rapids, Washington. They'll have to win that in another game to make it to state. Good luck to them too. Many spring sports and summer sports, their signups are out in the announcements. So that's boys tennis, girls tennis, soccer, boys and girls, baseball, softball, and track and field.
And one thing I forgot to mention is that Model UN students are already starting to prepare for their trip that is coming up pretty quick on March 6th to New York. So, yeah.
That's
Thank
it
you,
for-
Kira and Trey. I don't know if any board member have any question for them?
Yeah, actually I do, because you mentioned the senior survivor.
Yeah.
When you say what kind of challenges, I get kind of curious.
So they sleep at the school in like this little room that's in this, it's like a tiny little room. Anyways, the challenges can happen anytime throughout the day. They can happen at midnight or they can happen during muskie time. They're not allowed to happen like during their classes, but anytime that they are free, they can have a pop-up challenge where they could have to stack cups or throw a ball as far as they could in the parking lot or something. It's really fun, and like one time last year they had to complete the the AP Physics exam at 2 a.m. in the morning in the auditorium. So that was one of them. So those aren't going to be challenges this year, so don't be trying to
Figure
it out. I'm just giving a few examples of that's happened.
Yeah, I can just add on to Kira's. So there's physical challenges, mental challenges, and then also like endurance challenges and stuff. For instance, last year we had them run a quadrathlon. It was like at midnight, so they were swimming, cycling, rowing, and then running. Yep. And at one point they also had to shave a balloon. That's also something. And the amount raised is actually above 5,000.
Yep.
So, and that's expected to go even higher because there's one more week of the fundraising going on.
And community members can come and donate during our community events. I don't know, we haven't set exact times for them yet, but we will list them soon.
Thank you.
Was there any reports from the trip to China from anybody or from administration?
So we're going to have them here at our work session
Okay. I just thought,
later this month to talk about that. Yeah.
And I guess it'd be nice if, because of the UN folks, maybe after they get back from their trip from New York, that'd be great to have them too sometime.
Thank you, Kira and Clay. As usual, great reports. So thank you. Keep up the good job. Thanks. Okay, moving forward, we have the citizen speaks. If anyone in the audience wants to address the board, please step to the podium, state your name and address. Basically, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Per Iowa code, we cannot respond or engage in any discussion during the board meeting, but that doesn't mean you cannot reach out to us after the board meeting via emails or phone calls and so on. So anybody would like to address the board? Okay, thank you. So next item is the board targets, goals report. Item A, students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Item B, Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably. And item C, students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. And with that, we go to our superintendent for any updates.
So I thought I would just quickly do some legislative updates for everyone tonight. Just updating, I think probably the one that's had the most, been in the news the most is the bill impacting the AEAs, and that is also tied with teacher compensation. There's certainly some discussion about separating those two pieces and making sure they move the teacher compensation forward. From an AEA, from that AEA standpoint, what I can tell you in my conversations with UEN, that's our large district association here in Iowa, is that there are ongoing discussions with legislators, with the governor's office, and again, what we're hearing right now, there's certainly a willingness to change the timeline so they're not having to decide by April 1st how those funds would be directed from AEAs back to the districts and what services that we would be asking the AEA to provide. It sounds like in the conversations right now, they would take a year to study that. They're looking at an independent organization to come in and do an evaluation, not just of the AEAs, but how we do special education in the state of Iowa, and then based on those recommendations, make additional changes. I would say right now, from the AEA services standpoint, I think in the last update, that special education services, that won't change in the dollars that would flow to the districts. Obviously, we would still get those dollars, but we'd have some time to determine what we would have the AEA do with that. The other piece is the educational services. And right now, my understanding is those dollars would stay. So we would receive those dollars and then determine from the AEA what services, professional development, support for our building plans and our district plans, and there's several pieces to that. And then the last piece is the media services. So I think this latest change is that the AEA can still provide media services, because at one point in that initial proposal, they would just eliminate all media services. That will still remain. However, right now, the current conversation is around, over time, eliminating those funds. So the AEA could still provide them. We would just have to fund them out of a different funding source, which obviously can be somewhat problematic. So right now, what I'm hearing is that would be restricted the following year to 50%, 25%, and then it would completely go away. And I think the focus from the governor's office is to try to reduce property tax burden through that. My concern is, obviously where are we going to find those funds to do that? What else are we not going to do? And in media services is really where we get some funding and support for the internet. So we're provided bandwidth that the AEA pays for us. There's also a number of pieces in there for internet security and some network security. All of those are extremely important to us. So we would certainly have to continue to do that in some way. My concern is if there's not another funding source for those, then where do those dollars come from? So we will continue to see how that turns out. So we've had these conversations, but we really haven't seen anything on paper that's been presented yet. So we will continue to keep you updated. But I would say at least it's been positive. I was at the legislative forum the other weekend, and clearly our local legislators did not feel that the initial bill or the amendment was good, and the rollout was not very good. So I think they want to take a little more time, which I think is appropriate, and study this a little bit more. So we'll continue to update you as that moves forward. The other piece that will certainly impact us is supplemental state aid. So they have a bill that's already been proposed, but there's no funding assigned to it yet. Typically, there's a deadline that they have to set SSA, and they're not going to meet that deadline. So what essentially that bill says is by the time that they close the session, they'll have it figured out. The problem for districts is that you're in the process now of setting budgets. So the impact of that is that as we work through, setting the budget, setting levies, we're going to have to assume that SSA is zero. And that creates essentially the biggest impact to taxpayers because we can't go backwards, right? So we basically start with the smallest amount given from the state. And then once they set that, then we can go back and change that. So that's important to remember because we will have to have additional hearings this year. There's going to be a sheet that's mailed out to every taxpayer that has the district tax impact, proposed impact, the city, and the county, right? So when they see that, it's going to be higher than what it will be. We just don't know what that amount will be. So we will continue to work through that and again, keep you posted on that, but that certainly impacts us. Then there's also some proposed legislation on providing full weighting on early childhood, which I think would be good. Although there's a couple of bills in that, and not all of them are the same, but essentially it's any student that's at the 185% of the poverty level or below, those families would qualify. So for a family of 4, that's about $55,000, okay? Again, this has been on the, bills have been pushed forward on fully funding pre-K for a number of years, and they typically don't get through. Certainly that would help to have additional funding for that program, but we'll see where that finishes up. So again, new bills coming out all the time. We just talked about in community conversations a bill that talks about school safety and requirements for or encouraging or requiring a school resource officer. And there is some funding attached to that, but it's what's called grant funded, which means would we have those funds long term? I don't know. And we already have 2 SROs, right? So you had to be at an enrollment of 8,000 students or larger in order to be required to do that. But again, these bills, they'll come out quickly, and we'll just see how that continues to change as these weeks go on. Any question about legislative updates? Okay. So just a couple more things I want to update you on. The District Environment Committee did meet last week right here in this room. A lot of great discussions. Really the focus for this first meeting was to get the group together to share out basically the conversations that happened at the district or at the building level So we had them in small groups where they were talking about at each of their buildings that small group represented. What were some of the positive celebrations? What were some of the things they talked about from a building standpoint? And what are some of the district things that they identified? Then in those groups, they kind of collected what the district topics were. To really, the goal was to create what were our top 2 or 3 themes across the district. And so we had papers put up and put those themes out there. And then in the end, each staff member got 3 dots that they could say, these would be the top 3 priorities for each person. We pulled those together. And the number 1 priority that came out of that group was communication. The second one was a district-wide behavior plan. And the third one was professional development. So what happens next is that group will get back together April 4th, and then we'll start to dig into those topics. So communication, what does that mean? What would some action plans look like for each one of those areas, and we'll start pulling that together. All of the reps then will be going back to their building. Part of their responsibility is to share that with their building environment team. So again, trying to create some kind of two-way communication between what's happening from a building standpoint and a district environment committee. So we'll continue to update you on that, but it was a good starting conversation, and we'll keep working from there. And then the last thing to just quickly update you on is the centralized kitchen is open, and it's currently, well, not currently right now, but it is cooking food. So that was a big success for us there. So we're happy to see that kind of up and running finally. So
Good news. That's great news. But Clint, I want to go back. I wasn't that fast writing what you said. So you said communication, professional development, and
and
what's
a
the third one?
district-wide behavior plan.
Thank you.
But again, we haven't necessarily dug into what that looks like and how we define that and created action plans yet, but we've identified the themes that we'll continue to work with.
Thank you.
Who
And
hol-
it-
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So who is on the District Experience Committee?
The District Environment Committee,
Yes.
so it's representatives from each one of our buildings and from all of our departments. And so from each building standpoint, there's a certified staff member and a non-certified staff member, and those were voted on by the buildings or the departments.
Is that going to be a rotating committee, or will it stay the same for a year?
It's certainly, the goal is not to, part of that was volunteer. They had to say, I want to be a part of this. And I know we'll have some people that rotate off for various reasons, so we'll continue to probably update that committee, but not necessarily requiring that it turn over every year.
And then are they doing work in between? Because April just seems really far away.
So they'll be going back to their buildings. Buildings are working on their plans. And so we initially set this up to be meeting quarterly. So, again, before the end of the year, we want to have some action plans in place that would start. And some of that will start right away, but certainly continue into next year.
Any other question for Clint?
And so is this meant to be an ongoing thing for every year then?
Yes.
Or just to get us to some point?
Nope, it would be an ongoing conversation, ongoing work.
Thank you, Clint, for the report. We appreciate that. Okay, so moving forward, we move into action, possible action. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. The items are 1 minutes, 2 employment recommendations, 3 bills and claims, 4 special education contracts, 5 policies, and that's the third reading, and 6 interfund transfer, and 7 agreement with Morningside University. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, those of you who are in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. So that will take us to next item on the agenda that we need to take an action on will be to approve administration authority to seek SBRC modified supplemental amount for 2024-25, returning dropouts and dropout prevention at risk program in the amount of $1,114,347. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve administration authority to seek the modified supplemental amount for 24-25.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. I see Tom is ready to answer any question here. And Tom, just for our audience, this is something that a normal, natural thing that we do every year.
This is an annual application that the board has to make. Now, it is for 24-25. The reason that we're doing it now is because this is all property tax that we're asking for, and it has to be rolled into our aid and levy worksheet, basically that you're going to be approving in April. So this is a piece of it. And then I did kind of summarize the dollar figures on the front page there, and then I did provide a proposed budget for next year, and it was the work of a few directors and some principals going into kind of revising this budget. A lot of these categories are the same as they have been the last several years. Now, if you remember, at risk, at the bottom of page 2 there, I did put a summary of, so the property tax, or the modified supplement amount that is on the agenda for tonight. And then we always have to, we're required by law to have a match, a 25% match of that figure. So, and then there's also some additional weighted at-risk funding that rolls into our total at-risk budget. So, yeah, and then there's additional pages there attached to your agenda for the different programming. So we are asking for the approval of the budget and the at-risk program for next year.
Any question for Tom?
Tom, are we losing any funding here, or is there anything that we're not going to fund with these this year that we did last year?
Well, as I said, we did revise this from this current year, and there were more positions, I guess, funded at the secondary level, and we're funding the 6 there that you can see. I guess it's 7 at the high school and 2 at the junior high, and then there was some support positions in 2 of the buildings or 3 of the buildings that are being kind of, I don't know if they're being reduced, but they're being funded in another way based on the need of the building and the number of associates that are needed at those buildings. And then the amount set aside for basically summer school / credit recovery is not as much as it was last year. That was kind of just a filler position or amount that would be needed if is available if needed to support the after-school credit recovery or after-school programming, which obviously for this coming summer, that is we're using ESSER dollars to continue our summer programming.
But would that still be part of this fiscal year, or is that on this one?
The summer program,
Right.
this or the summer programming? So
This summer programming
the summer
coming up.
programming, the through June is this fiscal year, and ESSER goes through like September 30th, I believe. And so we'll be able to use ESSER through this summer, basically.
Okay. So next summer, and I know the credit recovery is on here, but how does that break down to the Spark program?
So I don't believe we have any, there hasn't been any discussion about that program next year yet, in the summer of
But,
25.
but the ESSER fund will still cover this year?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
This year. But this budget would go into next summer, so if it's
Right.
not on here, then we haven't allocated it.
That's right.
Will there be room to put that back in if we were,
If something changes, I mean, that is correct. Something could change. Could change, and we could utilize at-risk differently, but for now, I guess,
because if we're looking at next summer, there's nowhere else in any of our budgets that the Spark program is sitting, right?
that is correct.
So we would need to,
This would be a resource. So Title I is also a resource. We've used Title I in the past, but keep in mind that Title I is specific to serving students in the summer from Title I buildings.
Okay.
And that's, would be K-6. And then we also have a resource that we've used in the past that we've carried over year to year, and that has been ELI, Early Literacy Intervention, and that too is for K through 3 students for reading. Okay. So there are resources that we had before COVID that we will have post-COVID funding. It's just a matter of how that is going to look. So it may not look exactly like Spark, but again, that's not my area, and I'm not prepared to talk about that, and I don't know.
But I think it's been a really important program for us, and we've had success with that. Because we've had ESSER, we've been able to just open it up to as many students as possible. So I really think part of that conversation is, what is that right size to ensure the kids who really need it get it? Because we're going to continue to offer a summer program, right? And we have a model that we know works really well. It's just finding the right size for that.
Keep in mind that, resource navigators are a large part of our budget, and we do receive a different grant of around $42,000 a year to help support. So what do we have, four resource navigators, right? 2,
4.
there are 4 on this.
Yep. And so between at-risk, and that's always been funded with at-risk, a combination of at-risk and this decategorization grant from the state of Iowa. So, and these other items, the new items I guess you see on here are the SEBA positions. We were given the task of seeing how we can continue on those services. So this is what's being presented.
So, and are there 7 SEBA positions in the description attached, but then this is
Yep.
rated for 4? Are those
Yes.
funded elsewhere as well?
So for one more year, we can utilize teacher leadership and compensation dollars that has been carried over from year to year. But again, that's for one more year, so.
And so the other 3 are being funded through that?
That is correct.
So along with that then, what are we doing to evaluate how well that those programs, that those CB are working?
So I'm going to turn that question over to either Clint or
Yeah,
somebody.
and I think that's why it's built in there, what goals and what we're tracking data-wise to, and again, this is something that they developed this year kind of enhance some of that information to you. So each one of those areas has goals and data that we're tracking over this next year for that. The other piece that comes up every year when we talk about this just is that at-risk portion. And are we at 0.35?
We're at 3.3%. Did I not mention that? I'm sorry. I had that in my notes here, but this is, 5% is the max that any school district can, I guess, tax for. And back when this was changed at the state level, they just said, whatever your percentage is now is what it's going to continue to be. So districts are anywhere between probably 0 and 5%, and Muscatine is at 3.3%, which is, so that's as much as we're basically asking for, as much as we can right now. And the state doesn't say, okay, you can go up to 5%. We could have an additional 574,000 roughly if we were allowed to do the maximum allowable.
But,
So-
oh,
Well, I was just going to say that has been a conversation around just the equity of that across all the districts in the state, where, because some districts were spending more at that time, they still continue to be able to spend that, and others who had less at that time now are capped at that. So there's been conversations each year legislatively to do something to adjust for that. It just, nothing has ever passed. But it is a significant budget impact as we look at that year to year.
but does that mean that, for example, if we go with, as you said, 3.3, it means it has to be every year 3.3?
No.
Or it
This
can
is
change?
This is an annual
Okay.
thing that the school, thing's not really the right word, but an annual application that gets approved by the board every year. And just like our budgets that we're going to certify in April, I mean, that is something that is a continuous topic that we're always looking at. So just because we're setting this now doesn't mean it might look a little bit different come fall. But, especially when we talk about our overall budget, there's certain things that we have to keep in mind, such as, notification to staff if they're not going to be returning and so forth, that we have to make sure we do. But, no, this is, as it kind of summarized on that first page, the property tax asking would add like 73 cents per thousand for our at-risk program. So I guess worst case scenario, if we didn't do it, we would have to reduce all of what is being presented to you tonight. So,
The 1.1 million, is that the 73
well,
cents?
what the district would receive automatically would be the $195,000 that are weighted at risk. So basically 1.4 million. But the 1.1 is the property tax portion, and then we have to take out of our basically regular budget the matching part.
So what was it last year to the property tax?
Oh, it's been roughly the same. Matt,
73 cents to the
since-
1,000.
Yeah, I mean, that'll change a little bit based on property valuations, but I don't have the history here. I certainly can have that Monday, or next Monday, the budget work.
It's not a
session.
new tax.
Right,
This is
it's
one
not
that's
a new
been.
tax. It's something that has been built in our tax rate for many, many
Yep.
years.
And my other question, why do we have to approve this now when we're doing budget work in the next
Yeah,
work
there's
session?
there's something in the law that says this part has to be done now because it's going to be built into our next part, which is the budget that's being approved in April, because it is property tax related. So that's why it's being done now versus later.
It doesn't mean that the change of, like some of these that are on the listing, for example, I'm trying to wrap my head around the one that it says school support services, yoga in the classroom.
Yep. That's a position that we've had in this district for several years, and it's funded 50% through at-risk and also funded 50% through special ed because of IEP. Am I using the right terminology? Because of IEPs and students needing that support. So that is not something new.
Do we know the cost of education for a non-at-risk student compared to the cost of education of an at-risk student?
Well, that would depend on, I mean, there's a variety of categories for at-risk. It's certainly, students at risk need more supports, just like our special education students need more supports. So that it is more expensive than a regular student or regular program student.
And in our district and in any district in Iowa, we set what the criteria is for the identification of at-risk students. So I'm not sure if that was listed in some of the categories, but I think it was. Was that listed anywhere? I mean, I think free and reduced is one of those, and then I believe certain grades, right? Come on, help me out. Yeah, attendance, thank you. And on track to graduate, thank you very much, audience. So.
So next year before this meeting, will we have those updates on the success of these programs prior to being asked to approve a budget? Because I feel like there should have been a discussion more, as we've heard a lot over the last couple months on the CB leads and all those programs and these activities, and we're coming in here with a budget prior to our budget work session. Not blaming anybody, but I just think there's plenty of discussion to be had at those roles and the activities, especially now that ESSER dollars are no longer available that funded a lot of this activity. And as we've been told, our little 5 to 15% happy path staying within our thing starts to look a little sketchy in 5 years. Is that correct?
Yep, so that, and obviously that is, you're talking about our unspent authorized budget, staying within that ratio of 5 to 15%, correct?
We can definitely bring that to you sooner, but we will also continue to talk about all of these positions and services because it has been a priority for us. It is something we've continued to talk about and should continue to talk about.
I would agree with, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I would agree with Matt that I feel like we need some more information and maybe some more data on the success of all these different inputs. I don't know at what point, this being my first year, I don't know the calendar of such things, but just before we make the decision, I mean, can these be changed, like descriptions, and that can be changed throughout the year once the
Yes. We're approving a budget on the dollar amount, but those activities can be changed.
Yeah.
I guess that would be my concern. I don't want to say that we're totally agreeing with all these descriptions.
Right.
Of this at this point, but.
Tonight, we need you to approve the number.
Right.
Yeah, I agree also on there, because this is a lot of information. I mean, it's very well, in a manner of speaking, presented, but it's a lot of information, I believe, for us to absorb on there. So some increment of time throughout the year on some of this would probably be nice. Thank you.
Well, I think,
Go ahead.
we have really great tracking tools here, I think, too, but we're just maybe not seeing it all come into play on these documents that were provided. And so as we're looking at the funding again next year or even evaluating, I mean, it's the second largest category for the CBAs in that at-risk budget. And so just looking across the buildings too and making sure that we're consistent in that documentation and tracking and all of that so that we can have a real picture. Because I think when we look at what we need to focus on, the communication, the behavior, the professional development, and then you read these descriptions, these are the programs that should be doing that and really solving all of those problems. And I think in several places, they definitely are. It's just hard to see it in a measurable outcome. And so making sure that we're doing it consistently across the district so that every school is reporting in a similar fashion or collecting feedback and outcomes in a similar fashion, that would be really beneficial for us. And then we'll really know if we have the right supports in place or if we need to pivot and make some different decisions based on the themes. Because we have been doing some of these for 3 years, and our themes continue to be the same. So I think just making sure that since we have all of you here tonight,
Well, and also, I think the data is great, and those of you who have worked with me know I'm not a big data person, but the relationship and are we actually getting any feedback from parents, students, and teachers as to the success of this program is another aspect I would like to just know more about. I'm not saying it's bad or anything.
Because a lot of times you guys know what you're doing, you know what I'm saying, putting that together. So sometimes it's almost like you assume that we should understand, you know, a little bit more on how to do this. So I think articulating it to us in a fashion, in a little bit more digestive, you know, amount of time and way would be helpful.
well, and can I just thank you guys too, because I know that we've asked a lot of questions the last few months, and I've heard from other people too how those conversations are transferring into the buildings, and so I think it's just good conversation, and it's helpful for us to know, because then that feedback kind of gets streamlined a little bit to answering those questions outside of the table as well, and so we know that things are working and you guys have similar questions to us, so it is nice to see that conversation happening in the background, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I see this as a normal ask or natural ask, especially now because ESSER money is not going to be there anymore. So,
Right.
so I think moving forward, yes. I mean, it would be nice to perhaps start having some discussion from time to time about this. Yeah.
I would also like to thank everybody. I mean, everybody's doing what's best for kids, I hope. I mean, that's the goal. But I also, I don't know, I've been out in the buildings and quite a bit lately. If somebody has, I don't know, and I'm not saying you don't, but is there a sharing process? Like for buildings that have something going really well, are you sharing with other buildings how your success is? I guess I hope that's happening as well. When you're successful with attendance or behavior, or is that being shared amongst buildings so we can get transparency and consistency across the district? Just a thought. But I think everybody's working really hard, and that's a positive, so.
Can I
Jen,
ask
you
you
need
to?
I'm save Tom, the finance guy.
Yeah, and when we're making these decisions, if there's anything that we should know, that is the most helpful, because otherwise we don't know. So.
Right, that's why I wanted to just give you some, anecdotal information, I guess. Like, say, for one thing, recently at Susan Clark, we had a TFI walkthrough. So a TFI is just it's a fidelity check on behavior, and our social emotional behavioral coach was very involved in helping us create the behavior expectations for our school and how we go through that. So we did this TFI walkthrough with Paige Williams and somebody from the AEA, and so they gave us feedback to say, like, hey, what does it look like when we walk through your building? And they look at different things, classroom expectations, are they being posted? But they don't just look at, things being posted, but then they talk to students, and they ask students, what's going on, and students answer without any adult, so they're able to talk through those things. And our feedback, and I could share that, the form with you, was very positive, to the point where the AEA even wants to use our school as an example for other schools in our metro area that our AEA serves. So I feel like our behavioral coach, it was very instrumental in getting us, to this point. So my question to you would be, like, are these kind of things that you need to know about those roles?
Just knowing that the fact from the positive feed, you just said what you've done is now they looking at that for some of the other areas. That's in itself is nice to know.
Right, because that's an outsider coming into our building and really assessing, you know, through a rubric, looking at different things in our building, talking to teachers, talking to students. The only thing they didn't talk to was parents. So it would be a day, they just did a walkthrough with our SEBA lead, our counselor who's very involved in that environmental piece of it, and Paige Williams. And so, you know, they were able to answer some questions, but really talking to those teachers, viewing what was happening, seeing the relationships, and really talking to kids. And so, you know, that's really that positive behavior intervention system too.
I think, Jen, I mean, for me, as individual, I think, for example, let's assume, I don't know exactly on top of my head how many programs we created and supported those students using the ESSER money. Now, since that money is not going to be there, now let's assume we had 10 programs, and now because we don't have the ESSER money, we cannot afford more than 4. So those 4, how did we select those 4 with some sort of justification? Because I assume all 10 of them are important, and we love to continue to offer those 10, but if we cannot, we cannot, right? Due to not having that funding and that money. So I think really to know some sort of information, if we get some sort of information, why, for example, 1, 2, 3 are well needed out of those 10. I think that's also very important for us as a board to know. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and when you can attribute it to what you think is making it successful or giving you that, that's really helpful too, to just hear from the inside of the building what is happening. We had, your specific SEBA was here, is that Amy? Right?
Yeah,
She
Amy
talked about
Justice.
the morning meetings that they did and how great that was, and just having this allotted time where she's talking and presenting some kind of learning opportunity, or whether it's a behavior intervention that everyone across the building can use, and there's intentional time for that. I know that that's built into the whole process and the whole plan as well, but I think you guys have found a way to really implement it very well. And so that, I hope, is why you're seeing some of the successes too. And so that's really good to hear, and how you think it's working.
Yeah, yeah, and we, I mean, there's a lot of data that we could share, you know, but that was just, I just kind of wanted to give you one anecdotal, you know, piece that I could explain to you from a completely outside person coming in to do that fidelity check with us. Thank
And
you.
again, I would say, I would agree with what John had said, and it's got to tie back to also the attendance issues, the grade activity, the graduation rates, all those activities too. We only have so much tax dollar funded dollars to work with. So what programs are working, what programs aren't working? And again, looking at all those, because money's going to get tight in these next couple of years of this activity. And we still hear a lot from parents of, my child doesn't want to go to school. You start to ask why, and they can't give you a reason why. It's just, still probably a lot from the pandemic activity. But, just those issues, and how are these programs helping that? Or are there other programs we should invest in outside of these programs? So what's going to help us currently? Because we know as time changes, years go by, what may have worked a couple of years ago might not work today. So it's just a review, understanding that we're doing the right thing with the taxpayer dollars, and we're funding the correct activities to better our students. And the teachers too.
Right. And and two, since this role is fairly new, it has evolved over time. And we've had, a different person in the role. And really, sometimes it depends on that, finding that right person in that role. So Amy Justice stepped into that role, and her skill set, is a little bit different than what we had before. And it has really helped us as a team to progress and grow that way. And she has that time to really focus on that.
Thank you. Great discussion. Were any more questions, or shall we move on? Okay, all those in favor of approving the administration authority to seek SPRC modified supplemental amount for 2024-25 returning dropouts and dropout prevention at risk program in the amount of $1,114,347. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Moving forward, we move into item J on our agenda to approve contracts for the Central MS Improvements Project for $4,316,222 and change orders over $25,000 approved by the board. What are the wishes of the board?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
And when's all of this activity to begin and end and all that fun stuff? And again, this is tearing down Central, making a parking lot, and tying up some loose ends on the auditorium and the gym.
Correct, that will have some, it includes, excuse me, some roof repairs as well as HVAC system in there. One of the issues that we would have had to address sooner rather than later is the boiler. Excuse me, it's sized for that whole building, right? So if the boiler is too big, this is one of the things I've learned, what happens is if it's not getting enough call for heat, it doesn't run, so it actually would be colder. Even though you think this big boiler should be able to do it easily, it actually makes it less efficient. And so that would be removing that boiler and putting kind of a right sizing system in there.
Any other question? Okay, all those in favor of approving the contracts for the Central MS Improvements Project for $4,316,222 and change orders over $25,000 approved by the board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. So we move into item K to approve we need a motion to approve the 2024-2025 school calendar. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make the motion to approve the 2024-25 school calendar.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the 2024-2025 school calendar, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Next item is to approve the change order for the Muscatine CSD Jefferson Addition existing underground water line reroute for $109,086. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion to approve the change order for the Muscatine CSD Jefferson Addition existing underground water line reroute for $109,086.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So this water line, this happened to be
So
recently?
there's it runs right alongside the building, right? So with the with the addition there, and again, sometimes as you dig things up, you find more things. So instead of building on top of a main water line that if in the future you needed access to, you'd have to tear open the floor, they're rerouting it basically up and over the structure and back down as opposed to straight through right now.
No concern on freezing.
It'll be within the building, it'll just be up in the ceiling.
How big of a line is that? Like
8 inch.
8 inch.
It's a big one.
Any other question? Okay. All those in favor of approving the change order for the Muscatine CSD Jefferson Addition existing underground water line reroute for $109,086, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is to approve the purchase agreement between the Mississippi Bend AEA and the Muscatine Community School District related to the purchase and transfer of property parcel number 0833200048 for $250,000. What are the wishes of the board?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So as you know, this is something we've been working with the AEA for some time on at least looking at this site for use for our alternative high school. Initially, the discussion was around leasing that space from them, but given some of the challenges with the current legislation, we made that adjustment with them to look at a purchase. So what you have before you is the purchase agreement. The Mississippi Bend AEA, their board is meeting on Thursday, and then they would approve this agreement. After that, then we'll work on the approval for a lease. So what happens then is, you know, essentially we would own the building. They're going to lease space back from us for the areas that they need for early childhood. They do testing there, as well as hearing testing that takes place there. So there's a portion of the building that we've identified that they would maintain, and that lease agreement would be over a 10-year period to be extended again as we move forward. So tonight, you're approving the purchase agreement, and then we'll come back to you in March for the lease agreement.
This may be more about with the lease agreement part, but if something happens in that area where they're leasing at, is it fall on us for the repairs?
Would depend on what happened, but yes, probably it would, but some of that will be identified in the lease agreement. We did walk through the building with our architect, and they were looking at a number of things and saw no areas of concern as they went through.
Question. Have you talked to the fire department and got approval for what you want to do?
Yes, so that was the other piece, that looking at the structure, looking at what they need, and then they'll be in contact with the fire department to see if, you know, if it need to be sprinkled, or they thought, given the size of the building and the structure, that it wouldn't need to be, but those are all things they'll work through the city on.
We haven't talked to them yet.
So we've had them through the building. We will like draw out, because that would be a part of the next phase.
But similar to what it's being used for right now.
Correct.
Just the amount of people, I
Yep.
don't know if the head count increased
Yep.
or not. But
So one of the pieces we know that will be impacted right away is just bathroom access. So we'll have to do some renovation to the bathrooms to make them larger. If there's a certain number of stalls per person, then obviously when you put more students over there, you'll need more stalls.
What's the occupancy of that building?
I don't have a number on that, but I can tell you the overall square footage is 10,000 square feet. What we are looking at is 6,000, and then probably at some point transitioning to another 1,000 square feet, so a total of 7,000.
Other questions? Okay, all those in favor of approving the purchase agreement between the Mississippi Bend AEA and the Muscatine Community School District related to the purchase and transfer of property parcel number 0833200048 for $250,000, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. So moving forward with our agenda, we move into our discussion and information. And the first item on that will be January financials.
So tonight, the January financials are being presented along with comparisons to prior year, and then our budget to actual through the first 7 months of the fiscal year. And I would, usually February is that kind of halfway month as far as expenditures go, because majority of our budget is teacher salary and benefits, and they're paid over September through August. So the first 6 months of their of paying out teacher salary and benefits comes in February, so that's a very good measure of where we're at for the year. So tonight, that first agenda item should have been February 12th, and then you can see next week, or in 2 weeks, is our budget work session. And there I will talk more about the change in the law for public hearings. We basically have to have 2 public hearings. Public hearing number 1, I might propose to be March 25th, and that is the first date that we're allowed by law to have a public hearing for our property tax hearing statement. So after our meeting the 26th, I will show you what we will have to send to the county auditor by March 15th. And then March 20th, the county auditor has to mail out to every property tax owner in Muscatine County, in our school district, what your proposed property tax rate is going to be for next year. You know, we'll have to have, know that our public hearing then, our public hearing number 2, which would be, I consider our normal public hearing, will be on April 8th. And then we'll certify our FY25 budget then. So right now, those are tentative dates, but I don't see any way around not having to have a special meeting because of, we meet once a month. Our March meeting is the 18th, which is too soon before the first public hearing, and we can't wait until April 8th to have our first public hearing. Then we'd have to have another special meeting. So and the March 25th meeting has to be a separate meeting with no action items. It just has to be a public hearing, basically allowing any taxpayer in the district to come to the board meeting to talk about the proposed property tax, I guess, so, or the property tax rate. Now, keep in mind, when you get that property tax hearing statement, it's also going to be the city, the county, the school, and then, there's also other taxing authorities that will kind of be lumped in together, like community college, and I don't know what all the other miscellaneous taxing authorities are, but anyway, so that's the next month or so, okay? And then the January statements are presented. Again, I don't have any comments unless you have any questions or comments about January. There is one item missing, and that's in our nutrition fund. We haven't recorded any revenue yet for January for student sales, but not a huge deal. The published budget according to what was published versus actual, we're kind of right where we were last year at this time, and again, I'll have before you probably in May or April a proposed amendment to the 24 budget based on the construction that happens between now and then. I guess I would just point out on the revenue page 6, interest income has increased significantly since last year. I'm only pointing that out because that is miscellaneous income. It's not specific to any expenditure like other miscellaneous income, like federal grants or miscellaneous income, but there's expenditures that go along with that revenue. So just pointing that out as a FYI. Other than that, I don't have any other comments about January. So, thank you.
I just as in, if you help me out here with the Scalian Fellowship from the University of Iowa?
Yeah, that's, if you remember back, Jamie Krager came to the board about a fellowship that was received for paraprofessionals to get training in Des Moines, and that ends up being an intermediate source of revenue. See, I knew somebody would point that out because it really kind of did not like having to create that series of account codes. But nonetheless, that is an intermediate source of revenue from the University of Iowa. So that's what that is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, our next item under discussion and information is the first reading on policies 404.8 resignation. Anybody have any question about that? Remember, we go through 3 readings, so if anybody have any question or any feedback.
John, I would just add for this particular one, again, as you know, that challenge of, people have signed a contract and then after July 1st leave for various reasons, and it really puts districts in a bind to find suitable replacements. So a number of districts already have this stipulation in there. So we thought, given what we've been going through the last few years, it'd be a good opportunity to start talking about this.
Good idea.
Is that
Yeah.
an automatic, or is it if they can't find someone to replace them?
It's if they resign after that certain period of time, it would be, in order to get out of their contract, that's what they would have to pay.
So if it's before that June 30th, because I thought seemed to remember there was something about how soon we have to get the new teachers on board for the following year, so.
We could still, if they'd already previously signed their contract and then, let's say in June, we could do a pending suitable replacement. We just wouldn't necessarily charge them for it at that time.
So if you have any question after tonight, make sure you connect with Clint or Daphne for verification. So, but remember, we still have 2 readings here before this policy will be approved. So if there's no other question, we move into the announcements, meetings, and events. February 12 through 15, Conference Week. February 15th, 2-hour early dismissal. February 16th, no school. February 19th, President's Day, also no school. February 21st, we have a joint council meeting at the Mara Hotel at 6 p.m. February 26th, we have work session board meeting. And during that work session, we will have a report about that trip to China from the students. And March 5th, the Riverbend Mobile Food Pantry at 4 p.m. until طبعا supplies last at the MCSD Admin Center. March 11 to 15, spring break. And then March 18th, the community conversations at 5:30 here at the Admin Center. And March 18th, our regular board meeting at 6:15 here at the Admin Center. And so just a quick reminder again, the board meeting next month will be the 3rd Monday, not the 2nd Monday, due to the spring break. Any other announcement? Anybody have any other announcement? Okay, if there's no announcement, do we have a motion to adjourn, please?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay. Good night, everybody.